Okay. I would like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 12, 2024 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is J.D. Petrieva, Councillor and Chair of the Planning and Economic Development Committee. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers through the nearest exit, through chamber doors, and obey all instructions given. And if assistance is required, please see the Deputy Clerk, Devan. Okay. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, please ensure your cell phone is on silent or turned off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Committee of the Whole meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available on all our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. Members of committee are in attendance with regrets from Councillor Renjima this evening. We have staff in attendance in person and remotely. Additionally, we have representatives from the Citizens Tree Canopy and Protection Working Group, MHBC Planning, Urban Design, and Landscape Architecture, as well as Lozani Homes attending. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? I see none. Do members have any amendments to the order of tonight's agenda? Okay. We have no statutory public meetings this evening, and we have no consent agenda items this evening. So, we're now at the Planning and Economic Development portion of tonight's agenda. The registered delegation regarding the update on 4020 to 4064 Mountain Street development has withdrawn their request. So, we will now consider item 7.2.1 regarding the Tree Canopy and Protection Working Group update. And we have a presentation provided by Liz Bennion, representative from the working group. Please note the working group has a maximum of 10 minutes. The CAO will provide introductory comments. Mike, please go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll provide some comments and then turn it over to Councillor Brunet, who has been our council liaison and really has led that initiative for us over the last number of months. I do want to thank Liz that's here tonight, Verna that's not here, and of course Jane, who is also here this evening. Together, we've been able to co-create and start a work plan to move this item forward, and I think the presentation will be a very dynamic one. It'll be an interesting conversation that ensues, but I'm excited about the work we've done. We've really had an opportunity, I think, to learn from one another, and there'll be some quick wins that we're going to identify, and so look forward to the conversation. Any questions council may have. And now I'll turn it over to Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Through you, Chair. I'll be very quick with my comments. I just want to thank staff. I want to thank Melissa Shee, Matt Bruder, and Mike Kirkopoulos, who have been making their time available for the working group. And I want to recognize Verna Fleming, Liz Bennion, and Jane Woolsey for their diligence to make sure that we have been meeting diligently through the fall and through the winter, and trying to keep this on track. When the motion was first presented, we asked to try to have something come back by the end of the first quarter of 2024. We might be slightly a little bit behind that, but I think we're making some really good progress, and I know that the presentation this evening will highlight for council and for those listening tonight a lot of the good things that we're doing, and the targets that we have been hitting, stuff like the tree planting guidelines and tree lists, ensuring that town plantings will have proper native species. So I don't want to cut into Liz's presentation, but I'm really proud of the work that the group has done, and look forward to the next parts, which, as we see the draft document, the education and the public engagement process will then hit the road, and we will look forward to moving this policy and practices forward for the community. Thank you, Mr. CAO. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brunet, and thank you, CAO Kirkopoulos. Liz, please go ahead.
Okay. All right, Mayor Easton, councillors, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight about the working group on Lincoln's tree policies. As you heard, my name is Liz Bennion, and I'm a resident of the town of Lincoln. Is the presentation not up? Oh, okay. Good. All right, so a working group led by senior staff was formed following a direction from council asking for a review and an update to the private and public tree protection policies and bylaws to ensure that they reflect current best practices, research, data, science, and the need for an enhanced tree canopy that promotes livable communities and climate change adaptation. Town of Lincoln staff members of the working group are Mike Kirkopoulos, CAO of the town, Mike Bruder, the town's Director of Planning and Development, and Tony Brunet, Town Councillor, Ward 2. Melissa Shee, Manager, Prude Homes and Special Projects, has also been involved in the group's work. Local citizens groups that have been active on urban forest issues were also invited to participate. They are Jane Woolsey, Benchland Citizens Group, Verna Fleming, Val Fleming Butterfly Garden, and myself, representing Ontario Green and Biodiversity and Climate Action Niagara. Staff with specific areas of expertise, such as communications or bylaw enforcement, are included as needed. As well, experts from organizations such as the Vineland Research Center are contributing, and other organizations like Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority may be asked for guidance as the work moves forward. The first meeting was held on November 2nd, followed by meetings in December and January. The overall goal is to improve the health of the town's trees and increase Lincoln's tree cover through the implementation of proven best practices already employed in other municipalities, so that Lincoln citizens can enjoy all the economic, environmental, and health-related benefits of a well-managed urban forest. In just 3 months, much has already been accomplished by the working group. Following the first meeting, Liz, Verna, and Jane undertook a review of best urban forest practices and policies from other municipalities and put together a 53-page report, which was submitted to the working group in December. The report covered 12 areas of best practice, including setting tree canopy targets, methods to achieve tree canopy targets, tree planting guidelines based on the best practices recommended by Landscape Ontario's guide, quality and quantity of soil requirements for tree planting, list of recommended trees for town plantings, protections for trees during construction, planting standards for parking lots, maintenance best practices for newly planted trees, educating citizens on tree maintenance, private tree protection bylaws, adequate replacement ratios, and engaging the public to help the town reach its tree canopy goals. The fully referenced report not only provided examples of policy from other jurisdictions, but also charts and diagrams used by municipalities to demonstrate policies in practice. As well, every section included recommendations about how the suggested practices and policies could be successfully implemented. Staff have reviewed the report, and it will inform a new tree procedures and standards manual that they are producing. Part of the task of the working group is also to identify new opportunities that will further the group's goals. One opportunity is to work with Green Communities Canada and the Network of Nature to plant mini forests within our urban communities. Mini forests are based on a concept first developed in Japan of planting native trees and shrubs closely together in compact spaces. They are perfect for creating islands of biodiversity in urban areas. The strategy behind mini forests is to combine native species of canopy trees like oaks, sub-canopy trees like yellow birch, shrubs like chokeberry, and ground cover like maple leaf viburnum that have all evolved together, and plant them densely to encourage upward growth. By mimicking the natural systems, mini forests form beneficial fungal networks in the soil that help them grow more quickly. The density and fast growth maximizes biomass in the space, which also maximizes oxygen production, carbon sequestration, habitat area, etc. Staff have connected with the groups mentioned and have prepared a report identifying potential mini forest sites, so they will be ready to launch should expected funding become available. Two other possible opportunities that have been identified include a project called Replanting the Ancient Forest, which involves seed collection and tree planting from significant old native trees, which I will speak to in the next slide, and also holding a tree-focused eco-fest at the Fleming Center for Earth Day. The town of Lincoln has several outstanding old trees that carry the genetic legacy of the original forest that existed before settlers arrived. Examples include the Mountain Street white oak and the shagbark hickories at Jordan Lyons Park. These seeds can be collected and planted, and some already have been, or grown out in nurseries. The mountain oak already has been, and then planted. Opportunities abound with these projects, and I have already been in touch with the library about organizing tree seed potting sessions with community groups. A few nurseries, such as EarthGen in Wainfleet and Bee Sweet Nature Company in Pushlink, collect seed from local ancient trees. Community groups can work with funders and the town to preserve this precious genetic legacy by organizing community tree plantings using the seeds and the saplings of these trees. The working group is also examining urban forest challenges related to the issues of climate change and infill development. In terms of climate change, we are looking at the ways the town's tree policies can help mitigate the impacts of warmer temperatures. For instance, what policies do we need to improve the health and longevity of street trees so they can provide shade to pedestrians and reduce the heat island effect? And also, where should trees be planted to produce the most benefit? For instance, when planning children's playgrounds, shade trees should be planted to the south and to the west to provide the maximum shade impact. Another climate-related challenge is that some of the trees we grow here now will not be able to survive the warmer temperatures. Therefore, the town's tree list, used to guide town and developer tree plantings, must be seen as an evolving document that needs to change in pace with climate conditions. Our climate is predicted to make Southern Ontario feel like Ohio by the end of this decade, Kentucky's by the 2050s, and Mississippi's by the 2080s. Trees are long-lived, so we need to be cautious not to plant trees like sugar maple that are already at the extent of their southernmost range. Conversely, we may need to plant trees that are currently not native to Southern Ontario, but will be able to survive here in the coming years. This is known as assisted migration. It is currently being practiced by many Canadian and U.S. forestry departments, and I have seen it in action in Oakville. When I started the community tree planting program in Oakville in 2003, planting tulip trees was a very iffy proposition. By 2013, we had little concern about their chances for survival. Another challenge is how to compensate for increased tree loss within established urban neighborhoods as development and intensification increases. A Toronto study showed a 56% tree loss on redevelopment sites. A New Zealand study showed infill development caused a 35% decrease in tree canopy cover over a 10-year period. A study in Ottawa showed that 50% of retained trees on development sites were actually lost. By anticipating these issues, the working group can identify best practices that can be put in place now to avoid, mitigate, or compensate for future losses. As the process moves forward, the working group will liaise with communication staff on a communications plan and public engagement campaign on the tree management strategy, like the town has done so successfully with its parks planning. There are also many opportunities for public engagement as work on the tree management strategy moves forward. The town is fortunate to have many community groups, such as Benchlands and the Val Fleming Butterfly Garden, Ontario Green, and other local organizations who are willing to help with engagement, education, and events. The working group is pleased with what's been accomplished so far and looks forward to reporting to Council on future progress. And that's it. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Liz. Do members of committee have any questions? Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much, Chair Pachariva, through to the delegate. Thank you very much, Liz, for being here tonight. Very, very interesting, great information. I think the mini forests, I was really quite interested in that, and it really got me thinking. And I'm looking forward to, I know staff said they had identified some possible, maybe they don't want to say them at this point, but I think it's a great idea. There's little pockets that we could plant and create mini forests, and I just love that idea. I did think a lot about the climate change, and we've all seen it this winter. You know, with incredible amount of rain, the ground's wet, trees are starting to bud already, and they're at risk for, you know, if we have a major frost or snow event. So you kind of answered this, but I guess I'm thinking, when we're looking at our trees that we have, the trees that are getting up in age, and now with climate change, like, are we going to be losing a lot of those really old trees that just can't survive those kinds of weather events? I know you did comment on it, but if you could just give us a little more info.
Some species, of course, Some species, of course, are more vulnerable than others. As I mentioned, some are already at the sort of end of their range here, like sugar maples. And it depends on how hardy the species are. So for example, oak trees in general, but white oaks and bur oaks are very hardy and resistant, and they can deal with a lot. And older trees, in general, there are some that are different, but in general, older trees that have survived everything that's been thrown at them over many, many years show good genes. So just because a tree is old doesn't necessarily mean it's more likely to succumb to climate changes.
Okay.
But I think we do have to be prepared. We should be doing, very thoughtful planning and planting, so that we are planting the species that are adaptable. And as I mentioned, thinking about assisted migration, thinking about some things that shellbark hickory, for example, doesn't naturally occur here, but it occurs just south of us. So those are the kind of things that tree can live a couple hundred years. Those are the things we should be thinking about planting now. So I think as long as we put some thought into it and rely on the science that's being generated right now, we can have a good plan for the future.
No, that's great. I really appreciate that answer. That's very helpful, because I was starting to think, how many of our trees are truly at risk here. Just maybe you've already heard this from Councillor Brunet, who sits on the Heritage Committee with me, but we're currently in the process of designating the Grand Oak on Victoria and Green Lane. I didn't know if you were aware of that, and that's pretty exciting. And I had one other comment. Sorry, Chair. I forgot, went out of my brain now. No, I think I can't remember it right now. Maybe it'll come back to me. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Liz.
Just wanted to comment about the Grand Oak. So my husband and I just happened to stop at the gas station on the corner near there in the fall, when I thought, potentially there might be some acorns coming off that tree. And sure enough, there were. And because it's a white oak, if they're fertile, they start to sprout as long as the conditions are right. And so I gathered up a few sprouting acorns. And if you come to the back room in my house that has the big patio door, I have a bunch of baby oaks from that tree growing there right now.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. That's exciting.
They'll get planted out around the community eventually.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to Liz. Liz, thank you very much for your presentation today. I found it very interesting. I really like the idea of replanting the ancient forest. And again, this idea that if they've managed to survive this long, that means that they've got what it takes within parameters with climate change, as you mentioned. As I'm looking at this screen of the gentleman who's in the nursery, who's planting the baby trees, I'm assuming this is a very long-term plan. I don't know how old the Grand Oak is, that particular tree, but I'm assuming that the trees that I'm seeing here in the nursery can't be planted in a park or in a subdivision at this point. So I have a two-part question. The first one is, what's the time frame from these seedlings being able to be in a place where they can be planted and we can anticipate that they will survive well? And the second piece would be then, what do you see as a stopgap for how we're going to be filling in those wanted or desired plantings before these ancient forest trees are ready for us?
So it takes it depends on the species, and it depends on the conditions in the nursery and how they're doing it, but it's usually up to 3 to 4 years before you can take from a seed to something that you can plant. And then we're talking about small saplings. We're not talking about the kind of size trees you would plant in a park, for example, along a walkway. For that, you're looking at maybe 10 years or more. So it does take some time. But as I mentioned, there are a couple of places like EarthGen and B-Sweet Native Nursery that have been collecting seed and, growing saplings from them for years. So they have some ready to plant. In terms of doing it with communities and volunteers, and like right now, actually, we have some seed from the mountain oak that's at a nursery being grown, but it'll be 4 years or so before it can be planted. So you can buy some now from some nurseries, and we'll have to wait for, the seed program with community volunteers.
Thank you. To turn it off.
No, that was me. No, okay, so
I'm completely in the wrong spot.
can everyone come out, and then I'll put you, there we go. So, Councillor Mikluck, you come in.
No, it was Mayor Easton.
No, I got it. There we go, we're perfect. Okay.
You've got this meeting down pat.
I do,
JP.
go ahead.
So excellent, like you're saying, at least 10 years, probably more for some of the larger ones if you want to have a very, like these forests that we're talking about. Is there any discussion about non-native species? So I do hear a lot about the Carolinian forest and how we are a unique ecosystem for trees. Is there part of this plan, is it focused primarily on species that have been here since the dawn of time? Or are we I know you said we're introducing some of the hardier or warmer weather trees, I guess is how you do it. Is that okay, or is that, like, I hear a lot of pushback against non-native trees. So if you can just speak to that a little bit, please.
So I wouldn't say I'm a purist in that only native trees can be planted. However, I strongly favor the planting of native trees, and I'll give you my favorite example, which I'm sure some of the councillors here have heard before. But just to give you an example of how important native plants are to our local ecology. If you have a non-native Norway maple, which has been widely planted in southern Ontario, it's about 14% of all the tree canopy in the municipalities in southern Ontario, it feeds 2 species. If you have a white oak, a native white oak, just for example, it feeds almost 500. When you plant non-native species that our local fauna doesn't recognize as food, doesn't recognize as a place to lay its eggs for its caterpillars, doesn't recognize the berries or the seeds, then you're creating a hole in the environment. And we already are experiencing significant biodiversity loss, and the only way to make up for that and to try and support the biodiversity that we have is to plant the plants that support all the other things. So native plants are extremely important. That doesn't mean that in some particular cases and in some places, maybe a non-native species would do better than a native one, but we really should concentrate on native species and near natives, things that we can move up.
Thank you very much, Liz.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair, that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Liz. What I particularly like about this report this evening, beyond the fact that it's being created at the community level, which I think is really important, is the fact that you're starting to fill in some of those interstitial spaces that seem to be missing in the standardized reports that we've been working with in all municipalities for quite a long time. And I'm happy to hear about the biodiversity connection as well, because I think it helps to reinforce the education that we're going through. I think that's very, very important. I didn't hear you mention anything about Osage oranges. Mind you, I'm sure there's many things you haven't mentioned, but is it possible for them to be propagated? Are there seeds in those prehistoric-looking balls?
They are actually prehistoric, those trees. They've been around for a very long time. In fact, the scientists think that they were originally eaten by an extinct giant sloth that is no longer with us. And that's how the seeds were carried. Of course, a lot of times you find Osage orange now where indigenous people were, because they used them for various things. So anyways, Osage orange, yes, you can get seeds and you can get saplings of Osage orange and plant them. They're not that easy to find. And one of the reasons being that they have thorns. And so it's not the kind of tree that a nursery, a tree nursery that's serving a commercial market would carry, but specialty nurseries, you can find them.
Well, they're not for urban settings for sure, but they are quite beautiful, and the only ones I know of are the ones up near Brock University, which I was quite worried about them disappearing. This is interesting, what you're talking about with the shagbark hickory, that they are so rare. We seem to have so many of them on our property.
Not shagbark, shellbark.
Shellbark.
Right, so shagbark is native to this area. Shellbark, there are some in Niagara, more along the Lake Erie shore, but really they're south from here. They're more down into the States. But it's the kind of species you'd want to bring up. So shagbark is very common here. Shellbark is not.
Shellbark, okay, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for all the good work, everyone.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Councillor Michalak.
Thank you very much, Chair Patrieva, through you to Liz. Thank you for this work that you're doing. Question I have is with regards to the endangered trees or the trees at risk. And one of the things I hear from residents is, can the town come or can somebody come and cut this tree down? And it turns out that it's a protected type of tree, like a butternut type tree or something like that. And the question I have is, is this working group consulting with the MNR to determine if it's possible for a municipality to have a larger than typical amount of protected trees? And the reason why I ask that is because, like, if let's say there's a development that would like to, to occur, and there's a number of these protected trees or these endangered trees, which there are a lot of within a municipality, but because they're protected across the province, there's a rule that's set for everyone, as opposed to looking at it in a more localized area. Are we looking at that at all, or do we consider that?
That has not come up.
Should it?
Haven't considered that. But I think, when they set rules around endangered species, they're looking at total numbers. They're looking at habitat, unique habitats. I mean, maybe we have more butternut trees here because we have good soil for trees that are in the walnut family, which a butternut tree is. And we know we have an exceptional soil here, and that's where walnut-type trees like to grow. So it wouldn't surprise me to hear we have a lot of butternuts here, but they don't have a lot of butternuts everywhere, and butternuts are very endangered because of butternut canker. And it's a highly valuable tree for wildlife. So in answer to your question, again, as I said, it hasn't come up, and I don't have a good answer for you about whether it should or whether it shouldn't. We can talk about it in the group if you'd like.
Again, like it's just when residents come to me and ask, about cutting down this dirty old tree, and I'm like, well, it's a protected tree. I mean, we take trees very seriously, and they take quite a long time to grow. So when we even consider cutting a tree down, there's got to be a real good reason for it. So that's why I bring it up, and I'm not sure if other municipalities or anybody else looks at these things, and that's just something I was thinking of bringing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michalak. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Liz. Thank you very much for the presentation. Always insightful and educational. One thing I wanted to touch on or ask you about was the education aspect of how we get more people to plant on their private property, in neighborhoods, in the rural area, whatever it might be. How do we, I don't know if you can go back to your time in Oakville, if there was any strategies or plans that you had, but what else can we do to try to invigorate the planting and the investment that people are going to put into their properties by adding some of these trees that you're talking about?
I think there's all kinds of different things that we can employ, and we can look at what different municipalities all around Ontario have done that have been successful. So for example, in Mississauga, and I've seen it in a couple other places as well, they've set a tree canopy goal, and then they let the public know about the tree canopy goal, and anyone who plants a tree off their list of trees can then put it on a map that's shown on the town website. So every time someone in the community plants a tree, it goes on the map. And it shows how they're working together as a community towards this goal. My son, for a summer, worked for a group called Reforest London. And what he did there for the summer was they had a little mini tree nursery of their own, and they would do tree giveaways. And so people could just come and they could get the trees that the nursery grew, and if they wanted to make a donation, great. If they didn't, great. But the other thing that they did was they employed these kids to pack up a bunch of native trees and go down streets with the trees on a wagon. And every house they came to that didn't have a tree in the front yard, they'd knock on the door and say, "Would you like a tree? And we'd be willing to plant it for you." And right then and there, if the person said yes, into the ground the tree went, and then they handed them a brochure on how to take care of the tree. So there's all kinds of innovative things that, again, it goes back to the way we did this whole report. It's based on best practices that have already been tried and found to be, worthy. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think there's all kinds of things that we can employ.
Great. No, I think that's fantastic, and I hope some of those out-of-the-box thinking ideas come to fruition here in Lincoln. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Thank you, Liz. Just a couple quick ones to you. The mini forest, it says it needs a 3 meter by 3 meter to kind of start out, or is that best growing conditions?
I think that's the smallest possible size that you can consider.
Okay, because I was thinking cul-de-sacs. So there's a bunch of cul-de-sacs that are just grass. And when I was out campaigning, residents in my neighborhood said, can we put a few trees in that to, not only to cut down on the heat effect, but if it's doing what it says to plan there, this would be a perfect location, would it not?
I think it would work great on cul-de-sacs. You have to look at the soil. If what's in the
If it's
cul-de-sacs is
yeah.
a lot of debris from when they were building the road, then not so good, because tree health is largely dependent on the health of the soil. So you might have to do some soil amendments, I don't know. But it's certainly a worthy thing to look at. What you do need, it doesn't matter if you plant a drought-hardy species or not, you need to water plants for the first couple of years if you want success. So if you have a neighborhood that's around the cul-de-sac, and the neighbors, the 6 neighbors say this is what we want, and we're willing to help water those trees for the first couple of years, I think that's fantastic, and I think it would work great, and it's a great way to engage the community. And then when you have success, that's another thing that you can use for public education and to get the community more engaged. And also, to your comment that I should have said before, we started doing community tree plantings, and that really got people engaged in tree issues, and we started doing urban forest tours, and that helped a lot too. And there's no reason we couldn't do some of that here as well.
Okay, thank you. And a component to this, might it be like sponsorship? So when I was down in Windsor, highway overpass, and there was a big sign, WFCU sponsored this planting, and trees were planted all on, which was just grass on a interchange. Is that something that the group is looking into, or is that like to sponsor the build of these things? Because I go back to budget, and we were doing 2 tree giveaways, and we voted to only do 1. So a case of penny smart, pound foolish, right? If you say you're in the game of tree canopy growth, then you need to put your money where your mouth is, don't you? And $20,000 would be a small pittance in doing this, correct? I don't want to put words in, but
So we haven't talked about sponsorships for tree plantings, but it's something that we could consider. There is some funding out there for tree plantings. I mean, out of all the environmental things that used to get funded, that's one of the things that there still is some funding for. So it's a possibility to get funding for community tree plantings. But sponsorships, we haven't talked about it, but I'm sure we'd be open to talking about it.
Okay, terrific. And just one, because you got me all revved up about this, and just doing some research, cottonwood. So cottonwood tree would grow to about 30 meters with a big canopy. Is that something that is like a local species, or, and then with the, and now I'm thinking crazily, like as you said, you know, by 2080, we'll be like Mississippi, so should we be looking at cypresses and things like that? Or is that the way you need to think on this?
That is the way you need to think on it. You have to be measured in it, though, because it probably wouldn't survive here now. And I just finished doing a presentation about assisted migration, and so I looked at some of the species. I named a few species that should be moved up. It's not here in front of me right now, and unfortunately, I don't remember. But you have to do it in a systematic way, because we should start now looking at things in Ohio, then we should start looking at things in Kentucky, and be ahead of the curve, not behind it.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very, very interesting, and oh, Councillor Brunei, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Councillor Brunei.
Thank you, Chair. So Liz, just goes to show you, we have people at home watching this evening. So I just received an email as the meeting's going on, and one of the comments was, you know, great discussion by Councillor Russell bringing up, you know, how we can engage the public. The question that a resident has asked, it came up in our meeting, where, you know, one of the issues is local nurseries and the knowledge they have about what they're selling and what they're trying to sell. And, you know, the resident said, you know, we wanted to do this, and we went to a nursery, and they basically talked us out of it and said, prevailing winds, the tree's not going to die. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that, because we did speak about that in one of our recent meetings. I'd just like to get your perspective on that.
So I think some education has to go on with local nurseries as well. I mean, in the end, nurseries don't care what kind of trees they're planting and growing, as long as there's a demand for it. So I think part of it is on the public to start demanding native plants. And one of the things I do with all the educational presentations I do on this is I tell people, and I did 2 of them just on Saturday, go in with the Latin name of the thing that you want. Do your own research, know what you want, and then go in with the Latin name so that they can't sell you something else or whatever they couldn't sell the week before. Like, you know, go in knowing what you want. And there's a lot of good nurseries out there, and there's a lot of nurseries who carry native plants as well as non-native plants. We just have to encourage them to plant more of the native plants by, you know, consumer demand. They'll be happy to plant it if we want them. And I think one of the important things, and this is where municipalities can be a leader, if municipalities start demanding native plants, and if they start putting native plants on their tree lists for developers, that creates the demand too. So it's not just consumers, citizen consumers. I think municipalities have a big role to play.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brunei. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Brunei. The committee receive and file as information the update presentation from Liz Binion, representative from the Tree Canopy and Protection Working Group on Lincoln's tree policies and practices. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'll close that vote, and that motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Devan. Okay, we will now consider item 7.2.2, Report PD 03-24 regarding update on the 4020 to 4064 Mountain Street development. The Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Matt Bruder, will provide introductory comments, followed by a brief presentation from Dave Aston from MHBC Planning, Urban Design, and Landscape Architecture, who is in attendance tonight virtually. We also have staff from Oslany Homes in attendance to assist with any questions. Matt, please go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Just to refresh members of council, so this is an application for a townhouse development on Mountain Street or off Mountain Street in Beamsville that came forward last year, a townhouse development. It was one where there was multiple iterations of the plan that were completed as a result of input received, some of which pertaining to the build form. At one point, there were items such as back-to-back towns in the middle with some amenity space in the middle. There was a desire to move away from that into more of a block townhouse or a street townhouse type configuration. And accordingly, there were some changes to the entrance as well, which is the subject of discussion today, along with us considering the reintegration of some of that aforementioned amenity space. So initially, and I think Mr. Aston will go through this, from MHBC, they were the representative consultant working through some of these items at the zoning amendment stage. But again, multiple iterations from the entrance being much further to the south, then moved up to the north, and then council directed staff to go away and work with the applicant team and provide an update to council, which is why we're here today. I don't want to put too many words in Mr. Aston's mouth, as I know he's going to be presenting on the findings, but I do want to highlight that these outcomes of this additional work are something that town staff reviewed, multiple departments reviewed this, and we also liaised very carefully with Niagara Region, with Mountain Street being a regional road, all looking at different potential opportunities to move the entrance further north, which was identified as a potential desired outcome resulting from this process. So here to give a little bit of an update for that, as well as the integration of some amenity space, which at the time there was a discussion to provide a little bit of gathering space. There was a recognition that there is larger open space in the area, but to provide an opportunity for a little bit of that community fabric within the development as well for a smaller gathering space. So those are the items before you tonight for an update, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Aston.
Okay, Dave, please go ahead. Thank you, Matt.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council or committee. I see the presentations on the screen, so I think we're here really just building on Matt's comments. We've been working closely with staff, looking at the site plan as a whole, and addressing comments that have been received through the site plan review process associated with engineering, landscaping, waste management, all of the typical requirements associated with the site plan, and specifically looking at the site access to Mountain Street, and really how that works in context of movements on Mountain Street, movements internal to the site, and even a general integration of the access to the site with the amenity. So I don't know if I should share my screen of the presentation or...
Hi, Dave. We'll put your presentation up on the screen. Please just let us know when we can advance the slide, okay? Give us
You
one
can go
moment.
to the second slide now. That would be great.
Sounds great. Give us one moment. Thank you.
So this really is the site plan that we're working with town staff at this time. And through the details, as I mentioned, associated with engineering, landscaping, fencing, lighting, all of those matters that are typical of the process. It shows the access, which has been moved from the last time I was before council and has been angled such that the entrance and exit from the site, and probably of most importance, the exit from the site is directly across from the existing stormwater management facility, and not in any direct alignment with any home that's fronting onto Mountain Street or any driveway. So we've done our best to shift that driveway entrance as far north as possible, and yet maintain an internal configuration that doesn't result in very awkward corners or the loss of visitor parking space, which is something that was important that we heard, and trying to provide that amenity space that really, as Mr. Bruder said, would be a bit of a gathering space. We see maybe a pergola there. The community mailboxes could be there. Just that informal type of space where neighbors could connect. So the next slide, please. This really just focuses right in on the two things, the road widening, which we've confirmed, and thanks to Josh for all of his work and working with the region on that. And the site access. As you can see, the access we shifted since the council meeting somewhat to make sure it is entirely across from the stormwater management pond. A couple other quick points on this location, and in our letter submission to town staff, we did do a lot of work looking at the technical considerations associated with this entrance. One of the items, just keeping from a guideline perspective, is the Regional Access Management Guidelines. They have a recommendation of 75 meters from an intersection to another intersection. So in this case, Connor Drive, those guidelines recommend a distance of 75 meters. The access that would be the north one that we were being asked about would only be about 62 meters. We also understand that Connor Drive is could be planned for greater pedestrian connections and crossings. So we think it's best to locate this entrance kind of as far as possible away from Connor Drive so that that work can be implemented onto Connor Drive. When we considered what I'll call the northern access, it also resulted in a scenario where vehicles turning right off Mountain Street or left into the site off Mountain Street would come in and immediately have to make a left-hand turn into the site. And also they would be coming in at a point where there could have been potential driveway conflicts with residents of the townhouses backing into the laneway, and thereby creating a situation where the vehicles trying to exit off of Mountain Street into the site could be in conflict or could be delayed. And we think it's most important to work to have an access that gets people in and out of the site from Mountain Street as efficiently as possible, which is what the proposed access does. Vehicles can come in and out, and there's no conflicting movements with that. The other, just looking at the different access points, the northern access point would have resulted in, if there was queuing in cars wanting to leave the site, blocking of townhouse driveways, and maybe even some considerations associated with emergency access. With the proposed access, again, there's no driveways within the throat of the access, and really no conflicts until you're well past the landscape area associated with any stacking of cars lined up to leave the site. So we think we've got the right location of the access based on a number of technical considerations and really practical site considerations as well. With regard to kind of further angle or further shift, I think that could create some complications with the way that the site would then connect to Mountain Street at an awkward angle, and again, further result in some challenges internal to the site as you come in and creating more angles at that intersection. We think that intersection now aligns fairly well with stop control, and to be adding additional curves and kinks may create some challenge. So I think all that to say, we've spent a lot of time and effort looking at the integration of the access as proposed into the site. And as I mentioned, we think we've landed on the right location. We've got a bit of a shift that gets the access directly across to the storm pond. So we think that will help as well with regard to that location. And just the next slide is just a bit of a blow up of that intersection, if you will, the interaction of the visitor parking space, the amenity space, again, more of an informal type setting where there would be opportunity for people to connect, and really, something different as you enter into the site as a bit of a landscape feature as well. So I think that's really what I wanted to just touch base on this evening. We'll continue to work with staff on the details of the site plan and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Aston. We will now take questions for staff, MHBC, and Lozani Homes. So do members of committee have any questions? Councilor Mickluk.
Thank you very much, Chair Patrieva. Through you to Dave Aston. So, we did ask for more amenity space, more green space of some sort. And when I look at the conceptual drawings, and I've seen the advertisements on various social media platforms marketing these products, I feel like they're geared towards younger families, right? Like, or those starting out or first-time type home buyers. And I can't help but think, like, when I had a young family, I had a swing set in the back of my yard. Like, are people able to put swing sets or anything like that in the backs of their yards of these sorts of developments anymore? Or are we relying on parks to do that for us now?
Through Mr. Chair, I'm not sure about the size or the scale of the swing set, but I would say in the more active park space where I'm thinking you go, there's a large swing set or the merry-go-round or somewhere to run around. That is where we're looking to the municipal park space to satisfy kind of that parkland requirement, as opposed to each individual rear yard.
And I appreciate that answer. Because in this case, we're fortunate to have a park that's within 100 meters, but looking at other developments, say in the future, or from a planning perspective, like, it seems to me like the best thing or the most profitable thing for a developer to do is to just pay the cash in lieu. And I worry about parks in the future and how they look when that strategy is taken, as opposed to the creation of a community within a development. And I'm hoping that I wasn't involved in the discussions of, is this a big enough park, this community space? It looks like there's a couple picnic tables maybe in some sort of pergola. But is it enough for young kids that are under 10 years old to walk to unsupervised, or with close, within an earshot, like for parents to allow their kids to explore a little bit without having to go to a big park where they may get lost in the crowd? That's why I still value these neighborhood parks, and I just, that's the big concern I have that I brought forward with this amenity space. But anyways, if through you, if planning staff and those in working with this developer are satisfied with this amount within this community, then I'm hoping that they've done their best. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Mickluk. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Murray to take the chair because I've got a couple questions to Mr. Aston.
All right. Go ahead, Councilor.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Murray. So Dave, thank you very much. So, and I appreciate that you've moved the entrance to the storm retention pond, but it's at the most minimalistic point of the storm retention pond. So when we had that meeting 8 months ago, the thought was moving it more to a midpoint. Now, we've learned that there's a technical aspect of 75 meters between Connor Drive and any proposed entrance to this development. But at that time, I had asked, the possible flipping of blocks 8 and 10, right? So block 8 has 7 units, Block 6, or Block 10 has 6. So if you reverse those two, and again, if you reversed Block, appears to be 8 and 14, so moving the park space, so the amenity space would now be in the central, and you would move that entranceway farther to the north, more center of the pond. Did you investigate that at all? Was that looked at?
You, Mr. Chair, to Councillor, we did actually do the flip that you had requested at the council meeting, which pushed the driveway to this location. So that, we did make that change. I know it's a slight change, but we made that change from the council meeting to get the location where it is. I think in my opinion, to start to push this further, we start to get into a scenario where we're not lining up at Mountain Street at 90 degrees if we're changing an angle, or if we're pushing the road further north, say in between the two, we're still creating that scenario where vehicles are coming in, then there's kind of an awkward turn to come in and turn left, and it's just not really an ideal scenario for the traffic movement through the entire site to Mountain Street.
Okay, another question through you, Vice Chair Murray. Any consideration, Dave, given to, and again, the premise of the ask was about the entranceway. So, blocks 3, 4, 5, reversing them with the parking. So the parking would abut against block 119, the previous development off of Connor Drive, which would give you then a more straight line to Mountain Street. Was that looked at all? And if not, why not?
Blocks 3, 4, 5, just to make sure we're talking to you, Vice Chair, the same. Those are the blocks that back onto existing townhouses, I think is what you're saying?
Yes.
I can't say that we explored that as an alternative. It's not really an option that we had discussed with staff. I think kind of creating that type of, I call them a single loaded road, would also create a number of inefficiencies associated with the plan to do that. I can't say that we specifically looked at that. I don't know. It may shift the access a few more meters to the north, but it would ultimately create an entire redesign of the whole plan.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to let Director Matt Bruder speak to that for a moment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I just wanted to weigh in because I think it's a good thought for sure. And one of the things, we looked at this a little bit as well. One of the issues when you do it single loaded like that and you're abutting that existing development is the grade difference. Everything's sloping downwards and a lot of the visitor parking would then line up. So you'd be creating a kind of similar issue in a sense that we're trying to avoid going across Mountain Street. Yes, there'd be a fence, but it's the grade change that could present a little bit of a challenge there with moving the road. So I did just want to highlight that is one of the things that we looked at a high level when we reviewed that option. But I do agree it was something worth at least touching on and discussing.
Yeah. Oh, no. Can I? Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Matt, because, I mean, typically, and we've experienced this throughout Ward 2 with these developments where we've got backyards abutting backyards, and the slope, we've had drainage issues on Cherrywood. We've had drainage issues on Connor. We've had drainage issues on St. George's and Stadivor. Like, they're just time after time after time. So if it was a parking graded against a lot, it might have been a better opportunity. And just, you know, and the whole premise goes back to our public meeting we had that night when we had residents from Block 119. in speaking and saying garbage trucks couldn't get around properly. So we're just trying to right, through you, Mr. Aston, we're just trying to right a wrong of inefficiencies and inadequacies in the Block 119. So that was the whole thought process behind moving the entrance to the north, which would then allow a better flow. Because human nature, I mean, is a garbage truck going to come in from the entrance, make a right, go down to the hammerhead, go forwards, back up? We know they don't do that. So are these people that are living in blocks 7, 8, and 9 destined not to get garbage pickup? Or are they going to have to truck it up to where the entrance comes in? Like, this is the neighborhood that I walk my dog around and I see it. And I leave church and I drive out and I make a right and I see garbage blowing along the storm retention pond fence. I'm just trying to get the best outcome for the neighborhood. So I would have liked every rock unturned and stone looked at and everything put on the table. Sure, it might have been a rewrite of the design, but that's what Councillor Bernay and I are after, right? Because after you build this, you're gone. And these people have to live here and contend with the missteps that we've already experienced that we're trying to rectify. So, thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. Our next councillor is Councillor Brunet.
Thank you. Who am I responding to? Am I responding to? Okay. I didn't want to.
I was waiting for you to go first.
Yeah, I was trying to see Councillor Murray to kind of get the head wave. Thank you, Chair. So I have a question. Mr. Aston, in his presentation and in the report, similar to your questions, we heard and we're reading about traffic engineering standards. We're hearing about awkward corners. We're hearing about emergency access. So I'm just trying to understand, kind of what is trumping what here in not being able to move this road to the center of the storm retention pond, which is what we asked for 8 months ago. So through you, Chair, I'm wondering if Chief Hudson is on the call this evening.
Yeah, I'm told he's not here, Councillor Bernay.
Okay, so through you, I'm wondering if Mr. Bruder, Director Bruder could speak to this. I would imagine every time we look at a development, we have, turning radiuses that we look at. I'm just trying to understand, what's driving the bus here? Is it a combination of everything? Is it the traffic engineering standards that we're trying to follow through the region and the province? I look at the layout here. There are a lot of fire lanes. I'm trying to understand and really hope and appreciate that through this process over the last 8 months, that Chief Hudson and the Emergency Services Group was involved in looking at the various options to come to the fact that we couldn't move it any further. So I'm wondering if Mr. Bruder could maybe comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think in short, Councillor Bernay, to answer your question, what trumps what factors are in consideration, it is a little bit of everything, some of the things that you've touched on. When it comes to obtaining input from our fire department, as well as any other agencies, including the region, from a waste disposal perspective, they get circulated on all applications and subsequent submissions. So we're always obtaining their input with respect to what's being proposed in this case too. In addition to that, there's also certain standards for radii, for turning movements, for larger vehicles that are taken into account. And those types of movements are factored in with some of these other guidelines you're speaking of. I want to note, when we're talking about this site too, we're talking about an access out onto Mountain Street, which is a regional road, which is why it was such an important consideration that we get what the region's saying. We hear from the region directly, which we did. There was quite a bit of back and forth between staff and the region. And again, looking at their access management guidelines, it's not only that distance of 75 meters, that's one item, and that really pertained to the northern hammerhead, which is the northernmost part where we could have moved the entrance. And looking at that distance, and again, as has been touched on, looking at Connor Drive and some of the issues that have been brought forward there, even from some of our residents, from a pedestrian crossing standpoint, and just generally speaking, the amount of vehicles, it's a distance we want to maintain. So we go further and we try to work down from there. Okay, from 75 meters, what does that look like? Well, that's a mid-block kind of entrance in between the existing and where the northern hammerhead is. And we looked at that, and this is where some of those turning movements, there'd be a significant S-bend internal to the development. And now intersections that are not meeting tax standards, which is Transportation Association of Canada, so even a larger overarching set of standards and guidelines for distances and separations. So all of these things playing into each other have a factor on the evaluations, such as including the potential realignment too. You know, looking at, okay, what if we do kink the road a little bit? I think I heard, you know, a recommendation to maybe get rid of that southernmost unit in Block 8 and kink the road a little bit more. But then there's implications from a turning movement standpoint out on the Mountain Street and not being perpendicular and perhaps losing some visitor parking. So, you know, looking at these types of things all in conjunction with each other, I can tell you that, you know, departments such as our Public Works team and our fire department are heavily involved through all aspects, and that's all part and parcel that went into this overview or review of the entrance location.
Mr. Chair, thank you for allowing me to ask that question, and I appreciate Mr. Bruder's response. I think it's important that, that we understand the process that's gone on here. You know, we have had residents that have been very concerned. Mountain Street is a very busy road, and we've worked very hard for many years to get this dedicated as a community safety zone. So we know that we're moving towards that. Certainly, a lot of the conversations, a lot of the concerns that residents have had, especially the residents that live directly on Mountain Street, have been concerned about safety. And that community safety zone kind of goes hand in glove, with this development. And when we talk about, access and moving more residents out to Mountain Street. So I'm wondering, through you, Chair, I've had some conversations with a number of people. When you look at a community safety zone, Chair, we talk about having fines doubled. Well, what does that really mean unless there's enforcement? So I know I've spoken with the CAO as well as Director of Public Works, Mr. Graham. I'm wondering if Mr. Graham, through you, Chair, could speak to, what the community can expect in terms of the community safety zone and other enhancements that are hopefully going to be coming sooner than later from the region in that community safety zone, maybe speaking specifically to red light cameras similar to what we're seeing on Victoria Avenue in front of the 20 Valley School.
Thank you, Councillor Purding. Director Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Councillor, for your question. So we have some positive news that Mountain Street is a community safety zone. As far as just doubling the fines and raising that awareness for motorists that you need to take extra precaution driving through this area as a community safety zone, the other really big advantage is with the region's automated speed enforcement program, the speed cameras. So those speed cameras are being used in community safety zones. So we've really got an advantage here since it's been designated as a community safety zone. This Mountain Street in this area will be a candidate for the automated speed camera program through the region. Currently, the region is working and targeting a number of community safety zones across the region. If you recall, they're doing Victoria Avenue in the town of Lincoln right now. That's been the first round of community safety zones that are being targeted by the automated speed camera. The second round of the program will look at some of the additional community safety zones that were designated by the region a little bit later, Mountain Street being one of those. So it will be a future candidate for a camera once the region looks at expanding that program. So that is something to look forward to in the future.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask a third question? So through you, Chair, possibly to either Mr. Aston or to Mr. Bruder. I don't know who would want to answer this question, but and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I know tonight we're allowing the applicant to have the H provision removed. I understand the process, but one of the things that have happened over the last 2.5 years, from the time that this site was clear cut to some dirt removal, and recently with mud on the road, we have a lot of comments from the residents reaching out to Councillor Patriva and I, as well as staff, Mayor Easton, and to Josh, who's done a great job on this file. So I guess I'm just asking through Mr. Aston or through Mr. Bruder, what we can expect as next steps if this application moves forward. Residents are concerned, existing residents that moved into Lisani subdivisions, 4 or 5 years ago, that have been experiencing issues with noise, with trucks showing up on the site at 6 o'clock in the morning when they're not supposed to be there at 6 o'clock, with the dirt on the road, you've got an existing resident, a Lisani customer who moved into a Lisani home, who is now dealing with dirt and silt, and these people are concerned. It shows on your application, it talks about a proposed retaining wall. I'm wondering if Mr. Aston could maybe elaborate, what does proposed mean? Does proposed mean you haven't decided whether you're going to commit to it? Does proposed mean you're not sure what the engineering is going to look like, so you're not sure what components it's going to be constructed of, wood, timber, steel? I'm just wondering, because we are getting these comments from residents, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I do want to go it on public record that the applicant is taking these type of things very seriously. We have residents living in these houses that have been dealing with this, that want to make sure that some of these issues are going to be alleviated moving forward.
Yeah. Through Mr. Chair, maybe I can comment on a couple and then respond specific on the wall. I would also just suggest that I know that there are Lozani representatives there this evening hearing the comments. As far as the next step, should council remove the H, there would be a site plan agreement requirement with the town, in which case that would include matters associated with management of the site on and off from a construction perspective. Mr. Bruder could probably speak to more of the details in that, but typically that would relate to keeping the site in a good condition and cleaning the site and cleaning the access points to the site, and ensuring that the approved grading plans are not resulting in drainage leaving the site, and the silt fencing and all of that be put into place through the site plan process. With regard to the proposed retaining wall, it's labeled as proposed only because we don't have an approved site plan. We're working with engineering. There will be a retaining wall across the back of blocks 4, I can't read it, but anyway, across the back, adjacent to the existing block 119 homes. There will be a wall there that will pick up the grade difference between the blocks. That wall will be a stone wall, probably a prefab type stone wall. And on top of that wall, we're looking at now some kind of landscape, low maintenance cover, could include a river rock or some low maintenance grasses or some bark mulch, because there will be a bit of space between the rear yards on block 119 and that wall. So we've been working with town staff on that landscape component in that area. So that there will be a wall there. We can confirm that this evening. I hope I got everything there.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, Mr. Aston, and I do, I do feel that, we need to give credit where credit is due. Jeremy and Joshua and a number of our staff have been working with your Lisani staff over the last, I would say, 4 to 6 weeks, and we have seen some improvement. Sometimes it's difficult when we're dealing with temperatures that are fluctuating right around 0 degrees, and it's hard to keep the road clean with using water. So I just want to say that, your staff have been working with our staff, and for that, we appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
And I would comment the same, Counselor, to your staff. They are one of the best in communicating and sharing information and responding. So I would kind of echo that in reverse to your team.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brunei. Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Aston, I haven't met you before, and I don't know how you would evaluate the circumstances that have been going on negotiating the concerns that the public had. But I'm very interested to know, because I feel the angst in this room tonight, as is often the case, and I hope this angst isn't all one-sided. So I'm interested to know how you would describe the impact of the concessions that Lisani has made. Specifically, how would you describe the concessions that you've had to make in response to the public concerns? Because what I'm seeing in this report is a lot of work that looks to me like the public and our staff have been heavily involved in trying to find solutions. I'd like to know what part Lisani played in that.
Through Chair to the Mayor, good comment, question, I guess. I think angst may be a fair way to summarize, but I think what I would suggest is there has been a lot of collaboration between town staff and the Lozani team, myself as being part of the planning and landscape team, and Lozani's engineers, and internally Lozani staff. There's been a lot of dialogue to get us where we are this evening. There's been a number of changes to the plan since we started with this plan some time ago, in looking at entrance points, overall design to the site. So I think a lot of that over time has led us to this evening, and there's been a lot of good work. So I think I don't know if it's angst and how do we get to where we are, and kind of presenting our opinion and our comments associated with the proposed plan, and how we see that it in our opinion, responds to public comments in a bigger picture, and while achieving a good infill development for the site. The one comment I would make, and I was reminded of it in response to it, and I apologize for doing this, it wasn't your question, but I want to put it on the table, is shifting the road access further north and removing the blocks, as was suggested, what I understand would cause complications from a sanitary sewer depth and engineering issue, because right now the road is designed and the sanitary sewer is within that road. So it was really a combination of many different details and expertise to get to where we are tonight. So, things take collaboration, things take time, but I think what's being presented here is a good plan for the site, and will provide good opportunity for housing choice in the town.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, my second question relates to back to the question that you asked, which I don't think has been answered, is around the risk of waste trucks not being able to navigate and for people having to walk their garbage to a central location. Now, having dealt with this myself on a couple of occasions in other areas of the town, I haven't heard that this is absolutely not a risk. So I don't know who's going to answer this question, but this actually is I think that this is a deal breaker.
Oh, do you, Mr. Chair, may I take a shot and then perhaps Mr. Bruder can advise as well? The way that the site has been designed and all of the access roads and turn radiuses, all of those have been designed to accommodate both fire vehicles and waste management vehicles to the standards required for waste management pickup and the fire movement. So all of the movements forward and backup meet the requirements associated with waste management collection and the design standards.
Okay, we'll take that as the last word, and let's hope that we never have to have this conversation again. Mr. Chairman, my third question is really around removing the the holding provision, and whether or not it's absolutely essential that we do that tonight. So I guess we need that answer first. Is this an essential part of what we're doing here tonight?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as a matter of fact, we're not lifting the H tonight. This is one of the conditions among a few that have to be satisfied before the holding provision can be lifted. There's a few others in terms of us entering into a site plan agreement, the obtaining securities, dealing with the regional road widening piece that was referenced. So there's still a few items that need to be worked through. This is just one of the conditions, and if you'll recall, this was the one added by council when this came forward for recommendation. So we're not removing the H tonight, we're just dealing with one of the items in that list.
So
Hopefully that clarifies.
So that's the section E.
Yes.
And just to be clear, what we're doing with the section E is satisfying ourselves that absolutely everything has been done that can improve the circumstances around that and the public concerns. Am I correct?
To you, Mr. Chair, yes, if we would, in terms of condition E, it was just that staff report back. We've undertaken an analysis in collaboration with MHBC, the region, and our public works team to look at alternatives to move the entrance further north. We've exhausted the potential options that we've spoke about and touched on tonight, and it's also with respect to adding in some of the amenity space. So in dealing with condition E, we would come to the conclusion that that's been satisfied appropriately.
Okay, that's great. Mr. Chairman, then I do wish to support Councillor Brunet's concerns on the statements that he's made about compliance. And I think if we don't see some changes in this area when it does come to the H removal, that we're going to have to really have another conversation about that, because Mr. Aston, fortunately for you, you're not the one that's creating the problem. But we're holding you accountable, and I guess your colleagues in the gallery this evening, for the problems that occur, which seem to, it doesn't seem to matter what the public think. The people that are doing the work are the responsibility of the Losani Company, and they must get them under control. I mean, what was going on there last week was absolutely outrageous, once again. And it's always the town that's having to come after you, wasting our staff time, wasting our resources, trying to get a reasonable response. And I have to leave that with you because you're the person that's here tonight to take the heat on that. So I guess
Understood.
that's what you'll be passing on. Somebody's got a very short memory, though. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillor McLuck.
Thank you very much for the second opportunity through you to perhaps Public Works or Planning. So when I'm hearing comments being made about, the flow of traffic through this subdivision, and I see, this is, I think, about 140 units. When I see this many units being built, I see that many drivers driving, and usually it's at busy times of the day. And when there's a concern about stacked cars waiting to turn onto Mountain Street, are we looking at a possible concern down the road with regards to a potential stop sign, four-way stop or three-way stop at any of these intersections right now? Driving down Mountain Street myself, there's not one stop sign. I don't believe there's one stop sign that cars just drive right straight through. And should we be considering the possibility when we're looking at these plans? Because there's another plan that I'm sure is going to be coming to the south of this development.
Through you, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll start and I'll turn to Director Graham if I've missed anything. But as part of this, we've looked at what the volumes of traffic coming and going will be, especially during the peak hours in the morning and in the evening, to look at what the volumes will be turning in and out from this particular entrance and out onto Crown Street as well. We share these numbers with the region. Again, with it being a regional road, we have to collaborate and work with them. Ultimately, their set of warrants are the ones that are applicable when we look at things like four-way stops or traffic signals. To date, there hasn't been any warrant identified, and I also know that the region is also very aware, as we've been reminding them, that there could be other potential development happening to the south, as you mentioned, Councillor. So at this point, there hasn't been that need flagged, but again, I think it's an ongoing discussion, and as new concepts for other sites, for other upstream sites that might be getting ready to go through an actual development process continue, those get reevaluated on an ongoing basis. But I'll turn to Director Graham if he has anything to add.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Director Bruder. Just to add to what Director Bruder was saying, this is something the Niagara region is monitoring with their transportation planning and modeling, looking at, growth, looking at development along this corridor of Mountain Street. So at this point in time, there hasn't been any lights, traffic lights recommended or warranted, but, that's something that's going to be continued to be assessed and looked at moving forward by the Niagara region.
Appreciate that response. And I asked that question because a lot of people, they want stop signs to slow traffic down, which is not necessarily the right reason. Anyone that's driven on Cataract Road would know that's not the right reason. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking about this in the future, that we don't all of a sudden say, well, at the time, traffic didn't warrant that sort of a view, but now all of a sudden we have to deal with it, to the mayor's point about having to deal with things down the road. That's something I'd like to try to forecast if possible, worst case scenarios before they occur. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McLuck. And learned behavior is one thing, and then trying to change it after a pattern's been established is a different. So I appreciate your comments. Councillor Bernay.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. Through you, just a couple more, maybe call them minor points, but I think it needs to be discussed while we have Mr. Aston and the Lisani people here before us. So one of them is the Canada Post mailboxes. I'm actually currently probably dealing with, as you probably are, Councillor Patriva, probably 4 situations within Ward 2 right now where residents have concerns in some way, shape, or form about their current Canada Post mailboxes. So I'm wondering through you, Chair, first to Mr. Aston, when Lisani or to any of the Lisani representatives that maybe would like to give us some input, you folks develop in municipalities across southern Ontario, in many, many municipalities. So I'm just wondering, you know, when you look at a development, do you actually like engage with Canada Post when you're at the design stage, when you're at the site plan, or is this just a cookie cutter that Canada Post locations go in wherever they're deemed? Does the municipality have input? I'm just trying to understand, because like I say, currently, and I'm not exaggerating, 4 different resident issues with mailbox concerns in subdivisions that have gone in the last 3 to 4 years, from everything to safety to lighting to snow removal. I'm just trying to understand the process when Canada Post mailboxes go into an application like this.
Sure, Mr. Chair, maybe I'll give my thoughts and then Mr. Bruder can comment or from Lozania. But I know when we start to look at design of post boxes, I believe Canada Post is circulated. They, in my experience, haven't commented very often on location, other than to suggest it in a central location. So we try to look to accommodate them central to the site where there's easy access, actually looking to even put them in areas, and in this case, there's visitor parking, because even though the boxes are central to the site, a lot of people will still drive home, park, grab their mail, drive to their house. So we look to locate them near visitor parking so they're not taking up someone else's parking space. And then within proximity to, a central area with sidewalk connection. With regard to kind of the snow removal and maintenance, typically, in this scenario, it would be a condominium requirement as far as maintenance of those common areas. So it's typically a common area. And that's part of the declaration and the condominium charges associated with management of the overall site. So that's what we typically try to achieve. Sometimes we locate them with other buildings or, give a bit of an overhang to them. It just depends on potential location and a best fit within the plan. Now, Mr. Bruder, maybe I'll comment and on what the town looks for as well.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and definitely accurate with those comments. Whenever we have an application such as a site plan application, we circulate. We actually have a very specific contact at Canada Post that reviews these locations, but admittingly, we don't get a whole lot of detailed input unless there's a clear conflict with any particular aspect. We implement some lessons learned. Councillor Brunet, I know you mentioned some issues that we've had. There's been some conflicts too around, maybe some proximity to walkways and things like that we've had to stick handle as plans and overall connectivity plans evolve over time. So those are things we implement going forward when we provide our commentary, but Canada Post is definitely looped in and provided every opportunity to provide additional guidance and direction when it comes to Canada Post box locations, but typically their main criteria is accessibility and being as central to the site as possible.
Thanks very much for those responses. Chair Patriva, I just have one additional question. And Mr. Aston, similar question, really trying to understand perspective from the developer side, from the Lisani side, but then also understand from the town side. So similar question, if I could, to Mr. Aston and then maybe to Mr. Bruder. So you gave me a perfect segue. Visitor parking, appreciate the fact that you guys have kind of increased that. I think we're at 64 visitor parking right now. Is that correct?
I would have to confirm that because I didn't do that math tonight.
Yeah, I think we're at 64, so let's just say it's 64.
Okay.
But my question really is, I'm trying to understand, when a developer does something, do you guys look at the way the current, situation is that's happening, like trends? In other words, we've got baby boomers, with a whole flood of people retiring at the same time. And so when I look at 3 barrier-free accessible parking spots, I'm trying to understand, is that enough? And when I say is it enough, I don't mean to say is it enough because that's what you've been doing for the last 20 years, so that's what we continue to do. Do we actually look at trends and say, you know what? If we've got 3 for 64, maybe we need to increase that because we're having people, live longer and we got more seniors going to hit the street in communities like this. I'm just trying to understand from a developer standpoint and then also from a municipal standpoint. And really, you don't know what you don't know. And I got a 92-year-old mother, and she happens to have a handicap sticker. And when we drive around, when I've got her with me, everywhere we go, it doesn't matter if it's a shopping mall, if it's a pharmacy, or if it's, going out for dinner. It seems like you're always looking for a space. And I'm trying to understand, is 3 enough from your perspective?
It's a good question. With answering your question to the first way you didn't want me to, we're providing what the bylaw is asking for. The second aspect, I guess it would be balancing the visitor parking spaces as far as their availability. And what I mean by that is presumably if it's a barrier-free visitor parking space, only a barrier-free user can use it. If it's a typical parking space, anyone can use it. So have I seen a greater number of barrier-free spaces in other municipalities in their bylaws? Yes. So it's difficult to answer. I don't know if it's enough, because in some cases I would say, yes, that's enough. In other cases, it may depend. But what I would say is we try to look at the visitor spaces and some of the barrier-free being visitor spaces as well, within context of the broader requirement. So I guess as I look at the plan, and that's what I'm looking at, my apologies, if we thought we needed more, there may be some opportunity on the site plan to do that because they're kind of widening some space, but then you may lose some landscape space at the end of aisles, and you may lose visitor parking spaces because 2 barrier-free equal 3 visitor. So maybe something, if you leave with us, we could explore with staff. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces that I can see. Unless I have a small map, unless I'm missing. But I think it's a fair comment. We're meeting the zoning. We could explore turning some of the visitor into barrier-free, but we don't want to lose any visitor either, because we know that's important.
No, and I appreciate that, and I just hope if anything, we've piqued your interest to speak about this as we move forward in the application, in the process. As a municipality, we're talking about this all the time. Diversity, inclusion, and joint accessibility. We just had our joint accessibility committee in front of us, and we're talking about making sure that we're doing the right things in all our facilities here at Town Hall, in all our parks, and so I think it's something we should be looking at, in our subdivisions and the applications we're approving. I think it just goes hand in hand. So I'm wondering, thank you from Mr. Aston. I'm wondering through you, Chair, if Mr. Bruder could also comment on how we look at this moving forward as a municipality.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it is something important that we should be considering moving forward. As I've mentioned many times, to all of council. When we look at things like zoning provisions, sometimes they continue to evolve over time when new trends and conditions emerge. I think this is one of them. We're generally seeing a little bit more in terms of an aging population, not just in Lincoln, but all over Niagara and even beyond. So I think it's a valid comment as of right now. In terms of how we apply accessible parking provisions, a little bit tricky here because when you look at the built form, in particular the townhouses, for the actual required spots, there isn't any requirement, so we just look at the visitors, so maybe there's an opportunity to review that ratio. I would say, as everybody knows, we're looking at updating our official plan. Inevitably, when you do something like that, there are some zoning tweaks that tend to follow. Maybe this is one of them. So it's definitely a good takeaway, and I think a valid point that we'll consider as part of that process. Hopefully that helps, Councillor.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brunei. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much, Chair Pachariva. So my question is really just around procedure tonight and next steps. So tonight, we're focusing on E, which is one piece of the holding provision. And I'm assuming that the developer will have to come back and with the rest of the provisions as well before they can then finally apply for a site plan. I just want to ask that through Director Matt Bruder, if I'm correct in that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So right now, there's already a site plan application that we have and we've been working on, and some of this has been part and parcel and concurrent with that process. So what this means at this point tonight is that particular item within the list of items that are associated with the holding provision would be addressed. However, all the other ones, when you talk about regional road widening, you talk about site plan approval, you talk about us obtaining securities, all those are items that are directly staff approval. They're not required to come back to council. And we've recently had an update to our delegated authority bylaw, and this is in alignment with new provincial policy with respect to delegated authority items. Lifting of holding provisions is now also a staff approval exercise. So this was really, again, a little bit above and beyond what's typical for a site plan process. Normally, all of that is delegated to staff, but in response to comments received and direction received by council when this came forward last year, this piece had to come back, but this would be the only one out of that list.
Okay, that's very good. I just wanted to clarify that, so that's very good. So we're just receiving and filing this portion of the holding provision. Okay, got it. Thank you very much, Director Bruder and Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Timmers. Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quick hit question, dovetailing off of Councillor Miklavic's question about the flow of traffic, either through you to Director Bruder or to Director Graham. Knowing that, again, there could be some issues turning left onto Mountain Street at high peak times of traffic, do we have the flexibility to safely allow traffic through onto Crown if the majority of this traffic, or at least a good portion of it, starts using Crown as the throughway to get to a major artery without having to turn left? Is that a safety issue at all, or are we okay with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, we would be okay with that. That was looked at as part of the traffic impact study. So if there's times where people, if it's taking too long to turn left or whatever that case may be, and they want to go to the other access, that's perfectly acceptable. And there's stop signs and intersections to accommodate that, so.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, I'm thinking of the Ontario Street and Frisian intersection where majority of people give up turning left onto Ontario and they just come through down in Cedarbrook. Again, there wouldn't be an issue if it's just not some that are doing it, but again, a good portion or the majority of the traffic. That's still okay as well, based on the traffic study?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, yes, it would be okay because those roads are designed for that. I mean, maybe people wouldn't be used to seeing that if that case did happen. It's not anticipated that all the traffic would do that. You may find some traffic may do that, but those roads are designed to accommodate that level of traffic.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. And you've tweaked me now because in one of the I don't know whether it was a report or an email that I saw, and the traffic count was 80% turning left, 20% turning right. And to Councillor Mikulák's question about changed behavior again, right? We know that we're redoing Hillside and Aberdeen, and that's on the books, and it's happening, and the relocates are coming right now. And we want avoidance of downtown and bottlenecking. So was the traffic study done based on now, or as opposed to that update on those roads? Because those roads become updated and rebuilt, and we're encouraging people to find alternate routes to using Ontario Street. Maybe that study right now gets skewed where more traffic is turning right, going to Hillside, down Aberdeen, down Bartlett to the highway. I think that's ultimately what we want. So was any consideration, like right now, the road is horrific and it's closed. So the counts will be skewed. Is there any detail into that?
Through you and to you, Mr. Chair. Not specifically in the report pertaining to those types of improvements. I know the report generally forecasted development in the area, including some other potential sites, but I would add that just because of the nature of the turns and the percentage-wise that we're looking at, I think even if there is a little bit of a change in movements, I don't know if it's going to be substantial enough to alter, because right now we're sitting at 87% turning left in AM peak hours and 13 turning right. And then the opposite, obviously, in the PM hours, right, where everybody coming from the north, coming from the QEW and town, turning right into the site. So I think, ultimately speaking, because there was such a wide discrepancy between the two numbers, that even if there was a little bit of a change, I don't think it would skew it to the extent where we'd see a reversal in those.
Okay, thank you very much. And just, you know what, I just think we've taken the path of least resistance here, that things weren't really drilled into. And I'm not, because we had something in front of us, so I wanted better. So that's I'm gonna say, there being no further discussion, I've got a motion moved by Councilor Brunet. The committee receive and file as information the update presentation from Liz Bennion, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. There we go. There we are. There. I have a motion moved by Councilor Brunet. Receive and file report PD 0324 regarding the update and fulfilling condition E of the holding H provision for the subject lands at 4020 to 4064 Mountain Street. I'll now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I will close that vote. And that motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Devan. We have no confidential items. Do we have any committee remarks? No? And just, and coming out of this too, I just, the things that have gone on, and I would ask Mr. Bruder to, and I know we try to be good municipal, government, and we try to facilitate development in our town and work with developers. But, we've seen from the get-go that, rules haven't been followed. We provided a site alteration permit. And can we get some due diligence on, okay, before any work proceeds, a mud mat must be put down, and the road must be swept, and the road will use water when the temperature is above 10 degrees Celsius, if that's the magic number. Like last Friday, it was 15, 16, people wandering around in shorts and flip-flops, and the opportunity was missed. I hearken back to Mrs. Dijak, who was on the corner of Kayla and Highland Park. And, every day the road will with a capital W-I-L, be washed, swept. It's like living in Dust Bowl, Arizona. Like, we need to put these parameters in place, and if they're not followed, I'm sorry, like, then the work doesn't happen. The site's went in and clear cut on Christmas Day and Boxing Day. And then there was site remediation happening in there on New Year's Day, and we're coming up to Easter, and is this a pattern that's going to be repeated? So we need to put some measures in place, that there's some checks and balances. And if A, B, C, D is not followed, then we will not get to E. And it's that simple, because an infill development should not affect the residents currently living there. And time again, it's happened. There's residents in the Vista Ridge that don't have a grading permit yet. 3 years. So something needs to be done going forward and I asked staff if we can come up with some type of checklist, and again, where we go by at 6:30 in the morning, we make sure that work hasn't started, and then we go by at 7 o'clock at night to make sure that everything's cleaned up. And whether that's a site supervisor that we hire, or is someone on staff that goes around and checks these things on a random basis. I might be there in the morning, I might be there at night, I met there both times, just to make sure that what we have set in place and our expectations are followed. Okay. Mayor Easton.
Well, my question then is, where's the motion? Because we're the only people that can make these rules. So do I hear you that we need the list, a reasonable list, or do we make the list and then we get it on the table? And when are we going to do that? Did you bring that list tonight?
I did not bring that list tonight, but you know what? I can whip it up for next meeting with in consultation with
I'd
staff.
like to hear from the CAO
Yes.
what our timing and,
Okay.
how we can do this, because I'm with you, but
Yeah.
we need to take that step forward.
Mr. Chair, through you to the mayor, something that I'll take back with staff and explore, just the structure of what you're requesting. I know what you're requesting. I don't know what a motion actually looks like, and something that actually is, I don't want to say legitimate, but something that we can actually hold someone's feet to the fire on. So let me go back and maybe between now and the next meeting, if this is something you want to bring forward, generally speaking, we can look at that.
I'd appreciate that. Okay. Thank you very much. There being no further business, I call tonight's meeting adjourned at 7:54.
I was thinking the same thing.
That was me.